And welcome into the Monday edition, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you. Hope everybody had an outstanding weekend. Myself, Nick Keyser, live from very cold Middle Tennessee. Joe, it is 7 degrees at my house. The feels like temperature, according to my weather app, is -8. Where are you, and what is your temperature?
Well, I'm still in Venice, Florida, and I just realized as you're telling me that I mean it's like, well, actually it's 48, but I don't have a jacket, so that's good. So I'll be good today with no jacket.
Well, the high is
coming home.
high is 21, so it'll be nice and balmy by the time you get here.
Okay, we'll be fine then. Got a little hoodie. Wow, it's going to be like that, huh? It's going to be that kind of party this week.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. This is a deep freeze kind of stuff this week. Apparently, it's going to get into the 50s again this weekend. So just got to power through the week, folks. It's going to be a cold one, especially like the next 2 days here. Going to be pretty cold, but it's right at Nick Keyser's alley. Isn't that right, Keyser?
Hey, I guess so. You know what? But at least there's no snow, so everyone's not freaking out and going to the grocery store.
That is true. Although I did wake up yesterday and my driveway was covered in snow and was like,
hey, now.
Okay, all righty. And then that quickly went away. So we've already hit our snow quota for the year in my mind.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong that we have a chance to get some Friday, or is that?
I think there is a chance.
Okay.
I think there is a chance. So
cool.
Yeah, a lot of fun. A lot of fun. We got a lot to get to on the program today. Cory Curtis will be with us at 8:30 today from News 2. We got the Rob rant coming up at 7:45. Joe Rexrode will love it. Looking forward to that coming up a little bit later in the program. The national title game in college football coming up later today between Notre Dame and Ohio State. So we got a lot to get to on the program. Joe, we begin with divisional weekend in the NFL. The Chiefs take down the Texans 23-14. Philadelphia wins 28-22 yesterday against the Rams. A thriller between Baltimore and Buffalo, as we suspected that it would be. And the Bills walk away with the 27-25 win. But, Joe, I feel like we have to begin with the Commanders and the Lions on Saturday night. Washington, 45-31 winners against the Detroit Lions. It was a family affair down there for you, watching the Lions at a very, very highly anticipated game. Jared Goff with 3 interceptions for a number 1 seed in a playoff game. I feel like I've heard that story before. And the Detroit Lions find themselves one and done in the playoffs. Joe, your thoughts? How is everyone doing? What did you make of the game?
Yeah, my poor Uncle Bill, who at least again he's been able to enjoy a Lions championship. I mean, he had it all the way down to like Lions socks on, man. I mean, we had some cousins who were like, "No, I've got to go to like my chair to watch this because they always win when I sit in my like." Okay, but yeah, pretty rough night for the family. Also, I think it's kind of a rough night for a take I had last week, kind of in terms of I was just talking. Thursday or Friday, I think, about you build the great team and then you can still get it done with the good quarterback with the great team. Yes, you can, but I mean, this to me was, I mean, I'm watching Jaden Daniels and I'm like, okay, they're gonna be good, man.
Yeah.
I think anybody right now who says they take Caleb Williams over Jaden Daniels should be checked. Should seriously have their head checked. Like, what are you looking at? Because Caleb Williams makes some amazing plays where he runs around. Watch Jaden Daniels play. He's already a great quarterback, man. Like, I don't know. Like, what are you looking at? And I'm looking at Jared Goff, and I'm like, man, can't move. And no threat at all with his legs, which it's harder and harder to find in the NFL. And then of course he makes those critical errors. So it's a little bit of a reminder of like, it did bring Tannehill to mind. It did. I mean, I tweeted this is like their Tannehill game, which is like, got the number 1 seed, have a lot of going for you, but you're just not quite good enough at quarterback. And feel bad for Goff because he's had a hell of a run since kind of being thrown on the scrap heap by the Rams. But I just think that's probably my biggest takeaway. Like, you got to be better than that. So I think the Lions, as I told everybody would be the case, they screwed it up. They blew it. They will never do it. They will never play in the Super Bowl. They will never win the Super Bowl. This is why. And I tried not to gloat with my family. I felt bad for them. You know, my kid was devastated, but like, this is the reality. And if you're them, you're looking at it like, well, really good, probably going to be really good next year, but Jared Goff.
Well, Jared Goff, and then now what happens with Ben Johnson, right? You know, how good can they continue to be without him at the helm offensively? Look, obviously they've still got a loaded roster, and I think, you know, everybody was talking about their window after the game. I still think that they should be pretty darn good next year. But I assuming that Ben Johnson gets a job, which I assume he will. Like, how much does that affect what they do next year, and how much was this their 2021 Bengals game? I guess is what I'm asking. Was this their shot that they just flushed down the toilet?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And I think he will get a job. And it's a funny thing, too, when we want to parallel it to the Titans, it reminds me of the year before the Tannehill game, which is, of course, Arthur Smith, who had, if you remember, a pretty bad game as OC in the loss to the Ravens.
Oh, yeah.
And then went on. And when Ben Johnson, with his team down 10 in the most important drive of the year, called a reverse flea flicker and let Jamison Williams read the field and make a decision throwing the ball, I'm like, oh, okay, well, there you go. Ben Johnson's jumped the shark too. Congratulations. But I mean, I thought of that. I thought of Arthur Smith and the Ravens, and it's like, God, was he like too focused on interviewing with the Falcons this week? Like, what went on in this game? So, but you're right. And look at what happened. Yes, the next year, the Titans were the 1 seed, and they lost Derek. So, I mean, you can't sit here and say, you know, no one ever wants to give Todd Downing any credit for that, right? It was all everybody else. He was an idiot. I mean, I know that's what, you know, it makes it easier to say it that way. But let's face it, when the Titans lost Arthur Smith, that was part of the pretty quick disintegration of that offense.
No doubt about it. Bills win 27-25 against the Baltimore Ravens. The game that I was most looking forward to of the weekend. One team we know that has been clamoring for another shot at Kansas City was going to have to lose and was going to have to go home. And this time it is Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, and Baltimore that lose. Buffalo advancing to the AFC title game to take on Kansas City. Look, I thought a couple of things about that game. Number one, like, you can just see it when they're in the red zone, Buffalo. Like, just having Josh Allen on your team in the red zone gives you such an advantage. I mean, it's so difficult to account for him as a part of the running game. And then when you do account for him, it doesn't matter because he just runs right through you. Like, it's difficult to bring him down as well. We saw that again. And then just some mistakes from Baltimore, Joe. You know, Lamar had the turnover in the first half, the interception, and then the fumble. And then I thought Mark Andrews, I mean, he's just going to be having nightmares from that game yesterday. Dropped a critical pass in the first half, dropped the 2-point conversion, obviously, that everybody's going to be talking about today. Had a critical fumble in the second half as well. Just a rough one for Mark Andrews last night.
Yeah, it's brutal, man. I mean, it's absolutely brutal. And yeah, like I still think they're the better team. You know, I do. I think the Ravens are the better team, but it's close. And either one of them, I think an entire nation of football fans is like, please go beat the Chiefs now, right? It was whoever was going to win that game. So I'm excited about Bills Chiefs, and yeah, like, I'd love to see the Bills get there. Beth early on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, says, as a Bills fan, is this their last best chance? Is our window closing? Look, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, Josh Allen's your QB, so you've got one of those guys that you feel great about, and you should be able to knock on the door more times. But when you get to this point, you know, you don't want to squander it. And so I'm fascinated by that game. Also, Gunner here says Lamar can't win in the cold. No chance. Lamar, he turned it over. Like, there's no two ways about it. He threw a pick and then the weird snap and the fumble. Like, you got to hold on the ball. He was great in the second half. And it's not his fault that Andrews got the ball punched out on what I thought was going to be their winning TD drive, or at least go ahead TD drive. It's not his fault that he put the ball right in his hands for what should have been the tying 2-point. It is John Harbaugh's fault that he didn't just take a free point earlier and then take that free point and have overtime. But that's part of the deal. Coaches get like, oh, we can tie it up. It's a third quarter, man. Just take a point. Anyway, I feel bad for the Ravens, but I'm happy for the Bills. And yeah, it's going to be, I think, a fantastic game. And I just unless you're a Chiefs fan, I just feel like Chiefs fatigue, is peaking right now in this country.
Oh, it's peaking. There's no doubt about that. But all they do is win. They continue to churn out wins. They win 23-14 against the Texans. A lot of thoughts on the officiating in that game around the country. You have Patrick Mahomes taking his dive out of bounds, which was pretty funny to watch. But I mean, again, it's just a game where I didn't come away from the game just overly blown away by Kansas City offensively, although Travis Kelce does what Travis Kelce does in the playoffs, and that just be really, really good. And he's over 100 yards again. But they make big plays at key times. They score 23 points. Their defense continues to be really, really good. And here they are in their 7th consecutive AFC title game, Joe. It's pretty unbelievable.
Nah, it is. It's not supposed to happen. And again, Brady didn't do that. I mean, even in that Patriots dynasty, they'd have, ups and downs. And some bad years mixed in there. Then you come back, but the Chiefs have just been, the consistency really is incredible for them. So, I mean, look, on the other side, boy, the Eagles probably should have lost yesterday, by the way, too.
I agree.
But they didn't. So Eagles, Commanders, the Eagles in the Super Bowl against either of those teams is probably the more attractive matchup. But hey, man, I'm here for the Commanders, having a chance. They just can't stop the run, which the Lions at times forgot about, and that's not great in the cold in Philly.
Nope. And Saquon over 200 yards yesterday running for Philadelphia as well. So we've got Washington and Philadelphia in the NFC, Kansas City, Buffalo in the AFC for the right to play in the Super Bowl next week. We'll take your thoughts on that. The Titans made a hire at general manager on Friday, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. We'll get into that as well. Coming up next, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, the game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Joe, the Titans have hired their general manager. As typically happens, Joe, it's made official after we're off the air on Friday, but they agree to terms with Mike Borgonzi of the Kansas City Chiefs, who was the assistant GM in Kansas City, and he will now be the next general manager for the Tennessee Titans. Amy Adams Strunk, in the statement put out by the Titans on Friday, quote, Mike's experience speaks for itself. He's been a part of the core team that delivered 4 AFC championships and 3 Super Bowls over the past 5 seasons. It's the type of standard I want to build here in Tennessee. I know we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm excited for Mike to get started. That was Amy Adams Strunk in her statement on Friday. So it's Borgonzi. It is not John Eric Sullivan of the Green Bay Packers, which is where I thought things may be headed, Joe. Your thoughts on the hiring of Mike Borgonzi as the next general manager for the Tennessee Titans?
Well, it's good. He can answer for the fleecing that the Titans took on the L'Jarius Sneed trade. So,
that's true. I did think about that.
Put him in the chair and let's put the spotlight on him and ask, how did this happen, Mike? You lied to us, Mike. No, I'm with you. It's certainly it's not just a Packers guy coming in who worked with Brinker. So you'd think that at least there's chance for more, independent thought, dissent, different ideas, et cetera, et cetera. This is what happens. People like this get these jobs. And when I say people like this, I mean people that come from winners, doesn't mean that they're, doesn't mean that they're good or that they had a huge amount to do with the success. But, you look at his rise in Kansas City and, it's like you start out with, scouting and you quickly move up into the assistant director player personnel, and assistant GM for, the last 4 seasons. I mean, obviously he has been a part of building good teams. The Chiefs' constant, building and replenishing of their defense has been, we never talk about that because all we talk about is Mahomes and whether he has Tyreek Hill or whether he doesn't, and Travis Kelce and all that. But what they've done in building that defense and keeping it elite, or pretty freaking close to it is awfully impressive amid, the Mahomes era. So, as far as the possibilities here, I'd say he was probably as attractive on paper as any of them. So that's good. I also, again, still look at this as, it's just, it's still this whole, like, who's doing what and how exactly does it work? And is it as simple as you're just Brinker's number 2? They'll have a presser and try to address that. And I'm sure they'll pour cold water on that. But, it kind of reminds me at least of, like Rand Carthon's first year as GM, where it's like, okay, so who's doing what? Are they going to talk about collaboration at this presser?
I think there's a decent chance that might happen. Here's what Chad Brinker had to say on TennesseeTitans.com on Friday, talking about Borgonzi's preparedness and his shared vision. This was the quote from Brinker. Quote, he's literally thought through everything you could possibly think through as a general manager. He's mapped out the entire plan from everything he believes in, which is the same thing we believe in here, the draft, develop, and retain model. From that to everything about being a general manager, in particular when it comes to the evaluation from pro to college, the calendar, what that looks like, the meetings, to his plan on working with the coaching staff, to player development side of it, player engagement, sports medicine. He literally had a plan for everything. And then he's also been in a place that's been able to execute that plan at a high level. So I want to first, Joe, shout out Chad Brinker again for fitting draft, develop, and retain into that statement as well. It's good stuff. We're going to hear that a lot.
Yes. And also, he's literally thought out everything. You just stop right there. Like, he's thought of everything you can think of in the world, literally. That is a smart dude.
No wonder they hired him.
That is, wow. Holy cow, do you even have time to do all that? Yes, draft, develop, retain. That is the those are the buzzwords, I guess.
Hey, Mike, there's a lot of deer in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Have you thought about how we could get rid of those? Like, how do you solve the deer problem?
Mike, where does pocket lint come from? I've always wondered.
Mike, do you keep lints in your pocket? Are they covered, or mints in your pocket? Are they covered? Or are they uncovered?
Yeah.
What's our thought on that?
Would you take a mint from someone's pocket without a wrapper on it? There's a lot. Maybe that should be the press conference. If we can get everybody all on the same page, just ask him random weird questions, like he's like Mr. Science or something.
I'm all for it. I mean, in all seriousness, look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a Mike Borgonzi expert. I will say, I think just based on what I've heard about him and the reputation that he seems to have around the league, it feels like a good hire for the Titans. It feels like that they have taken a situation that I didn't think was the greatest scenario, and they've gotten a pretty good candidate out of it. Now, as you said, Joe, look, he's from Kansas City. They obviously have done a ton of winning in that organization. That organization has Patrick Mahomes. This one does not. So how much of a can you, number one, can you find that next quarterback? And if you do find that next quarterback, are they within the same stratosphere as Patrick Mahomes? I mean, that's the same. That's a heck of a 1-2 combo that you got to find there. But I guess my question, when you get through all this, kind of just boils down to the same thing. Like, do we have more faith in the process that they've laid out there now, that they've made their hire, than we did before? Or do we just feel like this is still like, okay, congratulations to Mike Borgonzi for being the general manager, but it's still the Chad Brinker show moving forward?
Well, yeah, the second thing. But look, when it comes down to it, Rand Carthon had a very important role. I mean, again, like we'll never, Kaharski, well, they said he had finals. Well, that's true. They did. And I still have, it still seems very much like Brinker was involved in every single thing. He was, and including this trade to Snead that I mentioned. So, I think it's the Brinker show. But if Borgonzi is good, and it's still a lot of this comes down to, it doesn't even have to be either of those two. Tell the Derrick Henry story over and over again with Blake Bedingfield. If he's has a good eye for talent and has good and can fight for whatever he believes and things like that. I mean, unless Brinker is just an absolute, dictator in there, and who knows? I don't know. Then he just hits a button and just mutes people when they try to tell him something. Then if this guy brings value and good evaluation skills and things like that, then that could be an asset for the organization.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, he's coming from a winning organization. Now, look, Rand Carthon came from a winning organization too. It's not always the be all end all is hiring people from good organizations. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. But again, you can't, it's never a bad thing to hire good people, right? Like it's never a bad thing to do that. So we'll see if Borgonzi is cut out for this and what sort of a difference that he can make from the Titans in terms of trying to build this roster up and get back to the point where they're competitive again. Trevor on the text line says, so what Brinker's saying is Borgonzi checked all the boxes. LOL. This is from Trevor on the text line. I think that's a good way to put it.
Literally checked all of them. Every single box in the world has been checked.
It may be a while before we move away from the checked all the boxes stuff. Good stuff, Trevor. 615.
That one has staying power.
It sure does. 615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the hiring of Mike Borgonzi as the next general manager for the Tennessee Titans. We'll get to more of those coming up next. What does this mean for the Titans moving forward? And do we feel better about their process here with how they've arrived at this decision? We'll get into all that. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you on this Monday morning. We are taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. We will get into the national title game between Notre Dame and Ohio State coming up shortly here on the program. By the way, as some people have pointed out on YouTube, Joe, going back to our Jaden Daniels discussion, Brian Kelly could not win at LSU with Jaden Daniels and Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. So there is that. Jaden Daniels did win the Heisman that year, though, so good for them.
Right. And also Brian Kelly tonight gets to watch the team that he said he can't win a national title there. That's why he went to LSU, play for the national title. Good times, BK.
Way to go. Good call. Good stuff. Taking your thoughts on the Titans. Mike from Pennsylvania says during GM interviews, they should have asked the finalists to take a sleep study to make sure that they can stay awake. Good stuff there. Says, I do think final say is overrated. No one talks about Kyle Shanahan running the Niners and their GM just being a contract sign. This from Mike from Pennsylvania on the text line.
Well, and that's the thing, because I don't think anybody in the league thinks that Kyle Shanahan is John Lynch is Kyle Shanahan's secretary, right? So I agree that it's overrated. You know, like ultimately, look, we all on our side of things, media fans, we all want to know both sides, who gets credit, who gets blame.
Right.
Sometimes you can go back in and find out who gets credit. Again, of the story that I love to tell that I've written about once, which is the Blake Bedingfield spending like a whole day starting at breakfast trying to get in the heads of John Robinson and Mike Larkin. Guys, if Derrick Henry's there, guys, I'm telling you. And, you know, and John Robinson's like, Xavier Howard or bust. And, you know, and finally getting to the point. So that was, you know, the head scout doing that. Yeah. So, you know, it is overrated. But ultimately, you also want the blame. Who's to blame for this or that? And I mean, I still don't know exactly. On some of the J-Rob stuff. Like, how much blame does Vrabel get? Some. You can't say none. So it comes down to these people collectively, or if they go sit in there, you know, everybody go sit at your desk quietly and come up with a plan. And then, you know, put it on a piece of paper, and then we'll put it in a hat and we'll draw it out. Whatever your process is. You get good football players and win football games, then great. Then you keep your jobs and get more money. If not, you all get fired. Well, maybe not Brinker. He gets 5 more years no matter what.
Draft, develop, retain. That's a long process they gotta get after here. One texter says, do you think Amy heard all the people talking about Brinker definitely bringing in the Green Bay guy and all the people complaining about it and forced him into hiring Mike Borgonzi? I don't know if I buy that, but I do. Like, again, if you had asked me on Thursday to put a wager on it as to who I thought the next Titans general manager was going to be, John Eric Sullivan would have been where I put my money. So again, pleasantly surprised that they didn't go that route.
Yeah. I mean, you would hope that the owner would not step in and say, after, you know, elevating someone, firing someone else, giving that person tremendous power, and then say, yeah, by the way, you're not going to hire that person. You're hiring this person, because I hear all these people complaining about how you're going to hire the Green Bay guy. You know, I mean, I guess I would hope that they just interviewed people and thought this was the best candidate. You know, like my question on this was, would someone like Borgonzi be attracted to a job that looks not like other GM jobs?
Right.
So,
well, and I think what we can say for sure, and we'll see how it plays out in actuality, but clearly, Joe, the Titans have done a good job here of selling this general manager role and the responsibility that's coming with it, right? Number one, they did it to the league because the league looked into it. And number two, I mean, they have ended up with a guy that around the league has a pretty good reputation and everybody thinks is on a track to being a general manager one day in the league. So if nothing else, Brinker and the Titans front office here have done a good job of selling this role, clearly. And look, you know, it's always, we've talked about this, it's one of 32 quote unquote general manager jobs. So somebody was always going to take it, and there was going to be good candidates that were available to them. But I think clearly the Titans have done a pretty good job of selling what this role is going to be as they move forward.
Yeah, which is no easy trick, I would say, given all that's gone on.
Yeah.
You get that chance. Sometimes you get another chance, but for the most part, I think the way personnel people look at these jobs is at some point, hopefully you get your chance, and then that's your chance, and then after that, you can still bounce around, you can still make money in the league, you can still work in the league, but it's very hard to get a second full GM job. So Borgonzi seems like a guy who could have some various opportunities. Remember, Adam Peters, who also came from Rand Carthon's organization, is probably executive of the year of the NFL, and he basically just said, "Thanks, Titans, but how about Rand? You guys know Rand? Talk to Rand." And obviously, that's not exactly how it worked out. I'm kidding, but point being, number 2 for the Niners didn't basically expressed no thanks but no thanks to the Titans. Number 3 got the job. So now Borgonzi, they must have done a heck of a job of selling to him, because it's not just the job itself, which of course will be asked at the press conference, but it's also, how could you not, if you're him or anyone in this league who pays any attention to the league, how could you not be a little bit concerned about the decisions ownership has been making?
Well, no doubt about that. And even the roster, right? Like there's a lot of work to do here, and there's a lot of, and we're going to get into this in the 7:00 hour. How quickly can you turn this around? I know that, Brinker's talking patience right now, and it's one of those things where you look at the roster and there's not a ton of young pieces to identify in terms of building blocks. We've talked about Latham and Sweat, but even those guys, I think, have some question marks as they move forward here. So, the draft, develop, retain stuff that we've discussed, how big of a project is this going to end up being for both Brinker, Borgonzi, all those things? I'm really interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I think these jobs, and this is not the case with Peters, but I think these jobs, just like coaching jobs, are more attractive if there's a quarterback you feel good about in place. Because, in theory, you're supposed to be able to at least have your one quarterback that you pick. But if you got someone in place, it just makes it so much easier. Now, Peters came in knowing that they had a high pick, but not the pick that was, not the quarterback that everybody wanted. And it turns out they got that guy. This GM job, Borgonzi comes in, and it's great to have the one, but also, how do you feel about your QB options if that's the way you're going? Doesn't seem like the best year to have the one, of course.
It does not. Let's head back to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Titans Bill to the program. Bill, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning. How are you two doing?
Doing good, Bill.
Good.
Okay. I like the hire. I believe it's an A1 quality hire, and it's like what I said to you before. You need to hire somebody who's capable of putting the train back on the track, and I believe he can.
Thanks for the call, Bill. Appreciate it. Again, I guess a question that we don't know the answer to, Joe, how responsible was Mike Borgonzi for some of the success in Kansas City, right? At the end of the day, if you're handing out credit for the success in Kansas City, where do you start? Well, you start with Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, and that triumvirate. And it's more than that. I get it. They've made really good decisions. They've made really good draft picks, but that's where it starts, right? And when you have those three, that's the main cog of what we've seen for this 7-year run they're now on, of ending up in the AFC title game all 7 years with 3 Super Bowls to show for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, some organizations, obviously, and I think Andy Reid, the Chiefs are this when it comes to coaching. Certainly, I think of the Patriots. Everybody wants to have a piece of that. Everybody wants to be that. Everybody wants to be the Patriots. Now everybody wants to be the Chiefs. It has not worked out on the coaching front. But what about in the personnel front? And honestly, certainly like the Chiefs have sent some other people out into the league as well. And the Patriots had, I mean, just John Robinson alone here was an example of the Patriot way, working with a personnel exec at another team. But no, if you're around a place that's had success, then you've seen a process that works really well. But sometimes there's one genius in an organization, and everybody else is just glad they work with that person. I mean, obviously, Rand Carthon came from a tremendously successful organization. We talked so much when he got hired about all the late round picks, right? And he had stories for anecdotes for how they came to some of these guys. The Niners have had some amazing late round success.
Yep.
And well, what did it mean? What did it amount to? It didn't amount to anything here, So, but the bottom line is, this is what this is how it's always going to work in this league. People that work for winners are going to get these opportunities.
We will get back into the Titans coming up at the 7 o'clock hour. How quickly can they turn this thing around? How quick can they get back to being in a spot where they're competitive? We'll get into that. We'll get into the national title game between Ohio State and Notre Dame coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Guys, we're going to get into the Tennessee Vanderbilt game a little bit later in the show. I don't know if you guys realize this. We have a 3-hour show. There's a lot of things going on. We'll get into the Tennessee Vanderbilt game. We'll get into the Nashville Predators. I promise. There's a lot of things happening today. Try to hang with us.
Monday morning, man. People want to complain. Maybe we should just do a booyah base of every topic, every segment. What do you think?
I guess
just
so.
Do, like off top of your head, just
there's a few things going on today. I mean, we had NFL playoffs. Titans hired a GM. Vanderbilt beat Tennessee Saturday in men's, Sunday in women's. Preds have won 3 in a row. We'll get to all of it. I promise.
There you go. You hit it. All right, we've done it now. We don't. Okay, yeah. Let's get back.
By the way, the national championship games tonight. So there's that too.
Yeah, there is that.
There's a lot of things going on. Speaking of that, Joe, Ohio State and Notre Dame. What do you make of the matchup? Ohio State is an 8.5-point favorite. It is the culmination of the first 12-team college playoff tonight. I will say multiple people have brought this up, and I kind of subscribe to this a little bit too. I think we need to move up the college season. It feels like the college football playoff is going a little bit too deep. Like January the 20th is a long time. And I've heard people that have said, yeah, I've lost interest in it. Let's move this thing up a little bit. Now, have they lost interest in it because their team's not in it, or they lost their interest in it in general? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it is January the 20th. It's 2 unbelievable brands. So if you're the college football playoff committee and you're anybody involved with the game, you're probably really excited about Notre Dame and Ohio State ending up in the national championship game. But what do you make of the matchup tonight? And what do you make of the fact that we're on January the 20th and here we are in the national title game?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. Like I mentioned earlier, like Stuart Mandel wrote a thing for us that was like, basically, can you get to the semis on January 1st? If the semis are in like the Rose Bowl or whatever, have that on January 1st, and then basically have the title game where it was before. I think that would be good. Now, I've heard some people also say, man, this is amazing. You got these back-to-back NFL awesome, which is the best, usually the best NFL weekend is divisional weekend, right? Doubleheaders Saturday, Sunday. Now you get into a national title game on Monday night. But I feel like it's like you're so occupied by the NFL playoffs here. I do feel like when we had the semis should be around when we have a national title game. And I think moving up the calendar would make sense in a lot of ways. So, yes, I'm for that. As for this matchup, I hope it's good. I do think that Ohio State at its best is the best team in the country. And this is where the 12-team playoff, it's like Ari Wasserman will scream and say, see, I don't want teams to get that second chance. If you screw it up, then you should have the consequence. And that's why I don't like the 12-team. And I get that. This is Ohio State had that second chance after blowing the Michigan game, which was the second loss, which would have kept them out of the 4. And now they turn it on. And I think they're the best team. So, do you like that or not? Overall, I've been pretty happy with the 12 team. I do hope this is good tonight. I think if Ohio State plays its best, they're going to win by double digits. But Notre Dame's tough. I'm also very interested to know, Robby, just the general fan in college football. Because let's face it, these are 2 big brands, like you said, that for different reasons, I think, are very annoying. So who's the general fan out there, unaffiliated, rooting for in this game? Who are more of them rooting for?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll be totally honest with you. I'm not excited about this game because I don't like either team at all. So, I guess my answer, Joe, like my tiebreaker is I really like Marcus Freeman. So I guess I'm pulling for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Now, that's the best I got. Like, I think Marcus Freeman's a good coach. I think he's cool. So that's who I'm pulling for in the game tonight, I guess.
Yep. No, he is. That's the thing. Like, if it was Brian Kelly then it'd be, because Notre Dame has been very unlikable, but some of that is like, they've had like in the last 20 years, Brian Kelly and Charlie Weiss as both as coaches. So it's like elite level unlikability. But I think you hit it. I think for a lot of people, it's just as simple as Marcus Freeman is likable, and Ryan Day is, I mean, I guess he's a sympathetic figure, because like Buckeyes fans have like put for sale signs all over his yard for years now.
Those still up?
I don't know. But I will say this too, by the way, just throwing this out there. I threw it out there already, but I'm gonna reiterate. I have not seen a Mike Vrabel offensive coordinator hire. Have you?
I have not.
I was talking to someone last week. It's like, let's wait and see if Vrabel still hasn't made a hire as of early next week. To me, he would be crazy not to pursue this possibility. But we'll see. I mean, it's probably going to end up being Josh McDaniels, just like Charles said. But I love the idea of Ryan Day winning tonight and absolutely Mike dropping his way into the NFL.
I think Ohio State, if they approach playing the way they played offensively throughout the playoff, they're just going to be too much in this game. Because, number one, it's so tough to contend with not just Jeremiah Smith, but that entire receiving core for 4 quarters. They're really, really good. So they're going to make some plays in the passing game. And the other part of that, Joe, is like their defense can just be overwhelming. Like their pass rush, their ability to get after the quarterback. I think this is going to be a game where if Notre Dame's going to have a chance to win, they've got to make some explosive plays in the passing game. And I just don't know how equipped they're going to be to do that in this game. So I don't love the matchup for Notre Dame's offense in this game. I do think defensively Notre Dame is good, and they're gonna have a chance to give Ohio State some problems. But it's a lot to ask unless Ohio State just goes into the shell like they're playing Michigan. It's a lot to ask to contain those receivers for 4 quarters.
Yeah, agree. And Notre Dame also had critical injuries up front on D2 that has hurt them, and they're not as dominant as they were. Yeah, I mean, Riley Leonard's going to have. I mean, the good thing is he is dangerous as a runner, and so that's going to have to really come into play to me. Like Notre Dame needs to use that to the fullest and get him, in some, QB power stuff and, and design runs, but then also he's going to have to make some huge plays. I think breaking the pocket. Jaden Greathouse had the 54-yard huge play against Penn State. I mean, they can find some huge plays, but Notre Dame, kind of like Penn State, they have a really good team top to bottom, and then they're just underwhelming at receiver. But yeah, Notre Dame, what have they gotten? They've gotten like the kickoff return against Georgia. They got the pick right early at Indiana when Indiana looked like they were about to go in and take a lead, and then they hop a 97 or 98-yard run. They have these huge game-changing plays, and that's what they're going to need too. And then, yeah, if I'm Ohio State, I am not letting someone keep Jeremiah Smith to 1 catch for 3 yards ever again. I don't care. I'll line him up at running back and give him 8 carries if I have to.
But run 3 jet sweeps in a row. Yeah, just give him the ball.
Yeah, he's getting the ball tonight.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And look, when you get to the end of this, if it goes the way we think it's going to go, we'll see if Notre Dame can step up and kind of rise to the moment tonight. But if it goes the way we think it's going to go, think about like the swing in emotion from everybody involved in the Ohio State program, from what the feeling was on the field as Michigan was planting their flag in the middle of the field to where they've ended up now with a chance to close things off with a national title tonight. There are still some Ohio State fans that are really mad, but I think they'd feel better with the national championship. At least I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the approval rating for him was, I mean, I'm going to say it was like 5 to 95. And the 5 is just people who are like, whoever's a Buckeye is my friend. I mean, that seriously is like the only people who didn't want him gone. And I would say if they win tonight, is it 95-5? I mean, it's something.
It'll be 90-10.
Yeah, he won the national title.
There'll be a loud 10. It's like, who cares? He can't beat Michigan.
Yeah, well, I did this fan story on Ohio State last week, and this dude was like, yeah, I mean, win the national title. I mean, we should definitely do that. And then if you blow out Michigan next year, I'll beat them, blow them out. And I'm like, geez, man, that's all you got to do, Ryan. That's all you got to do. Easily win this, of course, which is a given, and then next year go into Ann Arbor and blow their doors off, and then you're forgiven.
Coming up next, we'll get back into the Titans. How quickly can they get back into a spot, which we've seen done twice over the last 2 years from other teams, to being competitive quickly in a quote-unquote rebuild. We will also get into the National Predators next hour. We will get into Vanderbilt's takedown of Tennessee as well. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. We will get into the Nashville Predators later this hour, who have won 3 in a row. And I think I have an interesting path here over the next couple of weeks. We'll get into that later this hour. We will get into Vanderbilt's takedown of Tennessee. I've got some things to say on that in the Rob rant. Joe Rexrode, a message to Vols fans who, in my opinion, were being sore losers on Saturday. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the hour as well. Taking more of your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025, our phone number. So, Joe, we brought up at the start of the show, the Washington Commanders have taken down Detroit. They punched their ticket to the NFC title game. They've got a rookie quarterback. They went from a team that was constantly on the outs to now back in the NFC title game. I believe it's the first time since 91 that they've been in the championship game. So obviously, this has been an unbelievable season for Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. Last season, CJ Stroud took over as a rookie for the Houston Texans, and they went from a 3-win football team to an AFC South champion, a team that won a game in the playoffs, and that everybody felt great about their trajectory heading into this season where they, again, won the AFC South, won a playoff game, and you're still feeling good about where C.J. Stroud is moving forward here. Point being, with both of those teams, there was a long kind of journey through the wilderness of being out of the playoffs, not being any good. In Houston's case, you had all the Deshaun Watson crap going on behind the scenes and eventually the trade to the Browns. In Washington's case, you had the worst owner in the NFL eventually lose control of the team. New ownership comes in. There's immediately dividends with Jaden Daniels as their selection. And they went from being uncompetitive, non-competitive, and a team that was kind of an afterthought to a team that's now in the playoffs and a team that you feel great about their future. So if you're a Titans fan seeing those things, you say, hey, look, that's the beauty of the National Football League. You can be out of it one year, and you can be right in the thick of it next year if you make the right decisions. My question for you, Joe Rexrode, is can the Titans do something like this? Can they get to a spot where next season we're talking about them being a playoff team, being a team that's competing for the division? How much work has to be done between now and then for them to get to that spot? And how realistic do you think that is, given the fact that there's been 2 examples of it the last 2 years? Or do you view those examples more as the outlier moving forward?
Well, with the 2 examples you're talking about, the biggest thing obviously is the rookie QB who comes in and doesn't play like a rookie QB. So I guess if we're gonna talk Titans compared to that, then okay, CJ Stroud, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, pick one of them and hope one of them is amazing. There's also a little difference. Now, I do agree. I think in one offseason, Adam Peters did a lot. I mean, the Commanders had some talent receiver like Jonathan Allen. They had some guys, but they were, they're still not very good on D, by the way. But he did a lot to give them a solid enough team and I think that can be done. Absolutely. I think in one offseason, and John Robinson's a great example here, you can make enough moves to fortify your team. You got to have some stuff in place. Washington did. Like I said, they had some talented guys. The Titans back then, 9 years ago, had Lawan, and they had Jarrell Casey, and they had some pieces. Not a lot, but even when you go 5 with Delaney Walker, even when you go 5-27 over 2 years in the NFL, you should have some talent. Now the Texans are a little different, Robby, because they obviously nosedived, and you look at last year, obviously Stroud comes in, he's a big story. But in 21, the 3rd round, they picked Nico Collins. In 22, in the 1st round, they take Derek Stingley Jr. And they had some other, role players that have come in here and helped too. In 23, in that draft that they got Stroud, you also have another 1st-round pick. You get Will Anderson. He's a freaking monster. You get Tank Dell in the 3rd round. Pretty freaking good. I mean, even a guy like, Toe in the 5th round. I mean, they've had a lot. So they have they over years were building up that roster, and they have a legit D. I mean, that is a legit defense now, and so it looks like an instant, snap your fingers, but they had some things in place to be able to turn around. Still comes down to the quarterback and coaching, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think in both of those cases, you have Dan Quinn, who we know is a good coach, comes in and does an incredible job this year with Washington. And obviously, D'Amico Ryan's a very coveted coaching candidate out there, and he's lived up to the hype. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. With the Titans, okay, well, first of all, is your coach good? I mean, we're going to find out next year. A lot of pressure, a lot of questions, a lot of fair questions. And then, then what are they doing? Are they going to do my plan and go get a veteran, which, again, I feel shakier about after watching this last weekend? Or are they going to do the quarterback at the top of the draft and hope one of them's incredible? That's the only way. Because most of these rookies, Robbie, still come in and their team continues to suck like they did in Carolina and Indianapolis and here.
Yep.
And New England and so on and so forth.
That's the thing. Like it's really difficult to pull that off. And like, obviously the answer to this is like, if they do draft Shedeur Sanders and or Cam Ward, can one of those guys come in and be electric immediately? Like Jaden Daniels from the jump this year was really, really good. And that's rare in the NFL. Like right from the jump, he was making plays. I mean, Joe, I remember we had a conversation on the show like 2 weeks into the year, and we were like, have you seen Jaden Daniels for the first 2 weeks? And he basically just did that the entire year. Like it was unbelievable what he was able to do. CJ Stroud, I mean, it was pretty similar a couple years ago. Like he came in and he started lighting up the stat sheet, and I was like, wow, look at CJ Stroud. And it just kind of carried through the whole year. I guess that's with those two, that's what kind of stands out to me more than anything is they never really dropped off in their rookie year. Like they started hot and they just kept going. Like Jaden Daniels was really, really good throughout the entire year. So I think asking that of a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward, if that's the way you go, if you're the Titans, with what's around them right now, would be really, really difficult to pull off, even though you know that, I mean, there's still free agency and this year's draft class to add to the roster. I think that's a pretty high standard to set. So my answer is like, I realize it's happened twice in the last 2 years. I still think this Titans roster has a lot of work to do to make that even possible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you feel decent about a couple of those linemen. You feel still bad about the entire product of the offensive line, which is still the biggest thing that's been the issue for the franchise. You feel good about a couple of those guys on D. It's just it's slim pickings. But I get any Titans fan who looks at this and says, this is why we must take a shot and and try to get that next guy. Because when it comes down to it, those Detroit Lions built up one heck of a team. They have no Super Bowls to show for it, and that may have been their window. I mean, that's probably their best chance to get in there as you look forward in the NFC. And that Jaden Daniels and the Commanders for one thing. So it's like there's an example of a team that did all those things, but who's going to end up in the Super Bowl? It's either going to be Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes on one side. Now, if it is the Eagles, they are to me an example of a team that
I was just going to say that
he's a good quarterback.
Right.
He's he's a good player, but I don't think he's ever going to be one of the top guys. Right. So, if they win it with him, then I think down the road, 10, 20 years down the road, that'll be one of those teams you look at and see, there's a team that won it all and didn't have, a Hall of Fame, superstar, Pro Bowl, all pro type QB. Well, but three of the four teams will have that guy, because I swear to you, I am 100% in on the Jaden Daniels bandwagon, and nobody's going to talk me off of that thing. He is.
Well, it's hard not to be.
Incredible.
It's hard not to be. I mean, he's been unbelievable this year. And look, I'm not going to put him in Josh Allen, Mahomes territory yet, but I mean, the 1 year is about as good as you can ask for Jaden Daniels this year. And I think he's got superstar ability and traits written on him. I mean, you bring up the Lions, right? Like the other team that has been over the last 5 years, kind of the model of consistency with the roster that they've built is San Francisco, right?
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
it fell apart this year and they had injuries, but they've made 2 Super Bowls. They didn't win either one of them. So you would take that if you're a Titans fan for sure. But I guess the point is you've got all this the most talented roster over the last 5 years, and Brock Purdy's been a good quarterback. Jimmy G had moments of being a good quarterback for San Francisco. But think about Jimmy G, right? Like Jimmy G makes one throw in the Super Bowl for Mahomes' first title, and San Francisco wins that game. Like the throw was there to him. It was available. And he just missed it. Like it's really difficult to win a championship in this league without that high level quarterback play. It can happen. The stars can align, but it's really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to this discourse, because I know today it'll be screaming back and forth. I 100% believe, like if I'm the Ravens, I have one of those guys too. I have one of those guys. You know, the Ravens screwed up this year. They screwed up some of those games. I mean, you know, they blow out the Bills, by the way, but they screwed up some of those games. They blew some leads, or they'd be in a better position and playing at home. But again, last year they played at home and Mahomes got them. But
Yep.
like that part of it, I feel great about still. I mean, I believe that he can do it, but you have to tweak it. And the AFC is crazy because those guys are all over there, you know. And so Lamar right now comes in, I guess, third. I mean, he just lost to Josh Allen, right? But in the NFC, you know, I mean, he'd be the guy, at least for now. Although again, I think Jaden Daniels is gonna it's incredible the poise that guy plays with.
Well, then Jordan Love's going to take the league by storm next year. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. How quickly can the Titans turn this around? And seeing how this has ended up with the quarterbacks this year, does it make you want to take either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward even more with the number 1 overall pick? We'll take your thoughts on that. Get into the Predators coming up at 7:30, all that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. The Game Nashville Sports Network, your home for the college football playoff, presented by Twin Peaks and Parma Tractor and Equipment. Tonight, tune in to 102.5, 106.3 The Game for the college football playoff national championship as Ohio State takes on Notre Dame. The game will join in progress at 7 p.m. following the Commodore Hour. So make sure you're tuned in for that. Taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. Joe Deagle on the YouTube chat has one that you'll love. We can convert Will Levis to tight end, our very own Taysom Hill, which I think is what Rexrode's really been looking for the whole time. Need to replicate the Taysom Hill model.
You know, I could see Levis. Making some plays downfield, and then you put him in there, run some trick plays. I don't hate it at all, man. I've been a huge Taysom Hill fan forever. I mean, I feel like they missed the boat on him being the starter in the first place. So. Good call, man. I love that. I think Penn State, I don't know if Penn State, if they, did they try him somewhere else or something like that? They definitely just had
Weren't
him as
they thinking about like
QB.
linebacker or something?
Yeah, there you go. Yes. Yeah, which I can see that too, actually.
Football player, that guy.
That's right.
A football player.
That's right.
Quarterback didn't quite work out, but maybe H-back. Just put him all over the place.
I can promise you he would have caught that pass from Lamar yesterday.
That was a rough one for old Mark Andrews. I got one texter that says, the only way I'd be okay with the Titans taking a quarterback with the first pick is if they completely fix the right side of the offensive line in free agency. And I'm talking about the top right guard and the top right tackle. Because if you don't do that, whoever you throw back there is going to get killed. This from an unnamed texter on the text line. Trevor says, I just don't want the Titans to get desperate and reach on either of these quarterbacks and be back in this situation looking for a new QB in 2 years. That's kind of where I fall on it, Joe. Like, and I saw more of this weekend with some thoughts from the Titans on Titans Twitter of just how often do you get the number one pick? You got to take the quarterback and just take your shot. And look, maybe the Titans do that and it works out great. And one of these guys is the quarterback for the next 12 years. But I also think that there's equally, if not more, a greater chance, Joe, if you do that you're having the same conversation in 2 years because it just doesn't work out and you've reached on a quarterback. I don't love the idea of just reaching for quarterback, even though I know when you start talking about the quick turnarounds, the rookie quarterback has played a huge role in that the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on record as I'm out on these guys. Keeping an open mind in terms of, analysis. So there's going to be a ton of analysis and interviews and things to come on them. But I don't think either of these guys are going to be great. I just don't. So if you're not getting someone who's going to be great, then you shouldn't pick a quarterback there. I understand the counter of, then okay, great, veteran and build up the team. Then when do you ever get that guy? I understand. I do. So it's incumbent upon this now new front office to obviously unturn every stone. Is that right? Unturn every stone. You know what I'm saying?
I think
look under every rock.
I like unturn every stone. Okay,
we'll do that. Unturn. That's you know what I'm saying. To do their due diligence and see if they can, if they need to take one of these guys. But I also think that right now I would be willing to bet that if they had their choice of scenarios, other than obviously, hey, you can see the future, and Shadur Sanders is an all-pro for 10 straight years, but they'd probably pick the trade down option. And because they just need draft capital, they need depth, they need so much more on this roster. And we'll see. Does another team absolutely fall in love with one of those guys? Probably. It usually happens, right? Or they just talk themselves into it because it's like when it's the same thing. When do you get a chance to take the QB? Just seems to me like if that's your reasoning, that's why you are losing in near the top of the draft, probably.
It's gonna be fascinating to see how teams view that because, and look, I don't think this is exactly the same situation. But think back to the Kenny Pickett draft, right? Like we all thought, okay, like even I remember draft day, people were talking about the idea of Malik Willis going number 2. And we know what happened. He ended up going to the 3rd round. But the day of the draft, people were talking about Malik Willis going number 2 overall. So there's always kind of that quarterback tax, as I like to call it, of, hey, it's the quarterback. You evaluate those guys differently. But, 3 years ago, they didn't. Kenny Pickett was the only one that went in the first round. He was like, 20th? I think 20th overall is where he went. Again, I think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are both better prospects than anybody in that draft. I'm just saying it's not always just as simple as, well, the quarterback, they got to be top 5 picks. Most of the time it is, but most of the time there are also quarterbacks that, at least heading into the process, are worthy of top 5 picks.
Like, there was almost an entire day, right, of Levis, the number 1 overall pick.
Yes.
Hype, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, no, it's, yeah. And look, maybe this year it does turn out that, like, just because they're at the top of the mock drafts or the top 2 quarterbacks, maybe this year all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, Cam Ward was the first quarterback taken at number 16. It's like the Pickett draft. I doubt it. I mean, I certainly think, like, no offense to baby hands, but I certainly think that, like, both of these guys are more exciting prospects than he was. That was just that was an astoundingly bad QB class. But I don't know. I keeping an open mind on that, though. I definitely sense an overall lack of enthusiasm, though. And you're coming off the draft where, one, there's all this debate over who's better between, Caleb Williams and Drake May, and they both may end up being great. So I'm optimistic about both of them, but then the third guy comes in and might be just insanely good.
And by the way, there's
coming off that draft.
Who led his team to the
Nix.
playoffs.
Sure.
Yeah. There's the rookie quarterbacks in this last draft. It's 1 year. So we'll see if they can keep it going. But pretty darn good. I think you're feeling pretty good about all those guys right now.
And that's another reason. Again, I understand the Titans fans saying, okay, so every single guy last year was awesome, but now we can't take the rookie QB this year. I get it. I do. I totally get it. And I could absolutely be wrong for the first time ever.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. The Nashville Predators have won 3 consecutive games. And if you take a look at their schedule right now, there's an interesting opportunity that they've got here. We'll get into that coming up next. We'll have the Rob Rant at 7:45. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, sponsored by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. The Nashville Predators back at it tomorrow night against the San Jose Sharks. Preds have won 3 games in a row, Joe, and are playing pretty well right now. Philip Forsberg is on an absolute tear. He had 4 points on Saturday night in their win against Minnesota. By the way, awesome game against Minnesota. Preds win 6-2. There were 3 fights in like the first 4 minutes of the game, which we all knew was coming. Zach LaRue against Yakov Trenin. Luke Shen and Marcus Foligno in a big boy fight on Saturday. And then Ryan Hartman and Mark Jankowski. So a lot of physicality, a lot of emotion in that one. Probably the most fun game all year for those in the building. So they've won 3 in a row. And Job, just looking at their schedule coming up, they've got San Jose twice this week. San Jose here Tuesday, on the road Thursday, which hopefully we'll see Yaroslav Askarov in net for one, if not both of those. Anaheim on Saturday. They got Vancouver next Wednesday, Buffalo to close out the month of January. You look at their schedule before the Four Nations break here. It's not exactly murderer's row. You know, I just read off some of the teams. Pittsburgh, who's not overly great, is on that list. Ottawa's on that list. Chicago again. Buffalo again. You look at their strength of schedule for the rest of the season, and it's the easiest strength of the schedule in the league remaining. Now, Joe, I fully realize, having said all that, the teams that are playing the Predators right now are looking and saying, oh, good, the Predators are coming in because they're
right.
They're near the bottom of the league as well. So I understand that. But I guess my point is this. The Predators have played some pretty good teams recently. They beat Vegas. They lost a game that was a hard-fought game right to the wire against Washington. They kind of got salted away at the end of it with an empty netter. They beat Minnesota on Saturday, and albeit Minnesota's dealing with some injuries, most notably to Kirill Kaprizov, but it's a big win for them. The schedule coming up is much softer than it has been. Can the Predators go on a little bit of a run here? And if so, like, where would they have to get to by the time the Four Nations break comes around for you to feel like they've got a chance moving forward here? The Four Nations break, they've got a game February the 8th against Buffalo, and then they're off for 2 weeks. They don't play again until the 22nd of February. So between now and February 8th, where would they have to get to? They're 12 points out of a playoff spot right now. If they cut it to 7, if they cut it to 6, like, would you feel like that would you sign up for that right now? Would that give them a legitimate chance heading down the stretch? Do you feel like this team is capable of that?
So no one wants the better pick anymore? There's a poll I'd like to,
I saw some fans that were still pretty upset the other night. Oh my gosh, they're going to end up picking 10th.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, probably, get as far away from double-digit points as you can. Yeah, can you get in the 6-7 range? Because then you come back for still a long shot month, but a month of at least like an interesting month, right?
Yeah,
a month where you're in a race. Because if it doesn't get to that, then you just have this long break and it's just the slog. I mean, right now it's basically like, are the next 2 months going to be just completely meaningless slog? Or are they gonna provide any excitement? And they are. I mean, they're starting to play better. They're starting to look more like a solid hockey team. Probably too late, but these seasons are so long that even having some chance, and again, it's just amazing sometimes when you stop and look up and think about what we're talking about with this team compared to what we've talked about going into the season, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it is. I mean, everybody, the reality is long past set in now. So if they can make it interesting, I mean, it certainly makes the next few months better and more tolerable around here. And if you're a Preds fan, I do get it. I understand that you're also like, if you've given up and just like, please just get the best possible draft pick. at this point.
I mean, look, 12 points it doesn't sound like a lot. I was, and I've explained this to people the other day, kind of my friend group who's big Predators fans who were talking about this. They're like, how big of a deficit is 12 points? I think 12 points is a lot. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it just takes so much to go right. Not only do you have to win, but teams around you have to like basically fall apart, right?
Multiple teams.
Yeah, like the Predators, they're still the only two teams that are worse than them right now in the Western Conference are San Jose and Chicago. So in order to even get back into a playoff spot, they would have to pass Anaheim, Seattle, Utah, St. Louis, Vancouver, and Calgary. And those are the teams I'm keeping in this because like Colorado's got the first wild card spot right now. They're at 57 points and the Predators are 18 back of them. Like they're not catching Colorado. So like your one shot in my mind to make the playoffs is the second wild card spot because nobody's really running away with that. And even that's a tremendous long shot right now. So 12 points doesn't sound like a lot. I will say though, let's just assume for the sake of this discussion that they do put together a run here. They've won 3 in a row. Let's say they take down San Jose both times this week and they extend it to 5. And then they take down Anaheim on Saturday and they've won 6 in a row. Like, can you get to a spot because if they do that, we're going to start talking about this. Like, can you get to a spot by the time February the 8th rolls around where you get to that break and you look up at the standings and you say, all right, we got 7 points to make up in basically 2 months. We got 7 points. I think from a morale standpoint, like, look, being around those guys, I think they feel way better about the way they're playing right now than they did at any point this year, which is they should. I think they feel basically like, I don't want to say that they're playing with house money right now, but I think they're like, you know what? We're going to worry about figuring out our game. We're not really concerned about the standings right now because if you are, like, it's just a losing game to play for them at the moment. I will say, though,
no chance.
Like, if you get to February the 8th and you look up and you're 6 or 7 points back, then I think you start to allow yourself to be like, all right, we can do this. And I'm not saying that they will. I'm just saying, like, can you get to yourself to a spot where you can that belief can become somewhat a realistic goal moving forward?
So if you're a Preds fan, would you rather this team do that and kind of get it going a little bit, sustain something, and potentially just end up teasing, but who knows, and get it to that and make the rest of the season interesting? Or would you rather just all such talk just get put away and you focus on the draft of next year and not even be teased at all? I'd love to know the answer.
I'd love to know the answer to that too. And here's the other thing, which I thought about. Let's say they go on a run here. And let's say from a record standpoint coming down the stretch, they're one of the best teams in the league. And maybe they end up 3 points out of a playoff spot, 4 points out of a playoff spot. But it would be, I think, easy to look at it from like a fan standpoint and say, well, crap, we just totally screwed up our draft pick by doing this. You could also look at it and say, well, they figured it out and all these new pieces finally came together and they played really well down the stretch. So what does that mean for next year? What spot would you rather be in if you're a Predator fan? Because I know like the immediate reaction from a lot of people would be, oh my gosh, they just put this thing together and they're going to finish 5 points out of a playoff spot and it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to me, the answer is one is like, how does it look? Who's playing great during that stretch? Like, how much do you feel like it bleeds into next year? Right. But then if that's the case, also it's like, okay, well, this coach needs, like, you cannot do this anymore where you just become a totally different team in the second half of the season after. Yeah. Squandering so much of the season before that. Like, why can't that be figured out?
Yeah, like that part of it. Look, I think regardless of what happens, like Joe, my sense of it at this point is Brunette's going to be safe the rest of the year. And then they're going to take a look at the coaching staff. I would still probably, Joe, be surprised if they fired him after this year. But I think they're going to evaluate everything if it goes the way it's gone this year and they miss the playoffs. I will say, like, if they do the scenario that we've laid out there and they finish just on the outside of the playoffs, they better start well next year because I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Burnett to get the start of the season figured out next year. Like you can't have 3 years in a row of just absolutely falling on your face out of the gate. Like you can't do that. It becomes too much of a hill to climb at that point.
Right. I mean, yeah, you have to figure that out for sure. You can't just blame it on like Sorrow starting slow because it's not just that.
Right.
A lot of people saying, rather watch meaningful hockey, which I totally get. I mean, again, if you know that there's some chance, I would think that most people would be like, yeah, if there's actually a chance to get in the playoffs, because it is true that if you get in the playoffs, crazy things happen in this tournament. We talk about that a million times, and this is a team that, I mean, look. If you consider what it would take to get there. Yeah. If this team were to do the things it takes to get there, they're probably pretty dangerous at that point.
I would assume so. Now, let me again be clear. There's a long way to go before we start getting to that, right? Like they're still 12 points out of a playoff spot. They are playing way better right now than they have really at any point this year. But they're going to have to put together just a serious run here. Like they've needed one all year. Like to me, to even entertain this in my mind moving forward, Joe, they better win all 3 games this week. Like there's no, like, don't be screwing around with San Jose and Anaheim. You better win all 3 of these this week for me to even take this seriously moving forward.
And I just don't think they will.
They may not. I mean, they haven't all year.
I just don't have faith that they're going to be able to actually string it together like that.
Yeah. I mean, they've not been able to do it all year. And again, they're playing better in my mind now than they have all year. But I've reached the point with them that until I see them do it, it's hard for me to get there on that standpoint. Well, there's also some interesting trade stuff that came out last week on the Ryan O'Reilly front, which we'll get to a little bit later in the week. But a lot of things for Barry Trotz to consider right now as the Predators move forward here. We'll have the Rob rant coming up next. Take your thoughts, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Don't make me angry.
Sometimes you have to tell someone to pound sand.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the Rob Rant. Now on Robby and Rexrode.
You know, obviously they made some plays. We had a hard time staying in front of them at the end of the day. I'm just sick and tired of our guys getting smashed down there. Smashed! We'll get ready to play Tennessee. We were incredibly outmanned at the end. Had 4 guys on the bench in foul trouble. Joke!
It is that time of the day, time for the Rob Rant here on Robby and Rexrode. You can check it out every morning, either the Rob Rant or the Rex Rant. And Joe, my message today is for my fellow members of Vol Twitter and Tennessee fans. So over the weekend, Vanderbilt got a couple of big wins in college basketball. A 1-point win against Tennessee on the men's side of things on Saturday, 76-75, the final. And then followed it up Sunday with the women, a 71-70 win against Tennessee, both at home. So obviously, Joe, big wins for Vanderbilt and their basketball programs over the weekend against Tennessee. And specifically after the men's game, you know, I caught the end of the game before I headed to the arena for the hockey game Saturday. And I saw the way that it played out and some of the conversation on the old Twitterverse after the game. And I just thought to myself, come on, guys, you got to be a little bit better than this. Now, look, a lot of Tennessee fans, Joe, I saw were upset with Chaz Lanier and the way that everything kind of played out there. A lot more that I saw, Joe, were just sniping back and forth with Vanderbilt fans, which, as we've discussed, Joe, in this rivalry, particularly on the baseball side of things, it's been a lot of fun to watch Vanderbilt fans and Tennessee fans kind of snipe back and forth at each other. But some of the general gist of what I heard and saw from Tennessee fans on Saturday, Joe, was basically, well, congratulations, Vanderbilt basketball. That was your Super Bowl. I'm glad you found a way to win that game. Call us in March when we're making a run to the Elite Eight, maybe the Final Four, we'll see. Or way to go. If Tennessee cared about this game as much as you guys did, they'd have won the game by 20 points. Which in some ways, like, aren't you kind of indicting yourself at that point if that's the case, Joe? Like, shouldn't your team probably care about that game going on the road, in state, trying to pull off a win there? I think the lesson I take away from this, Joe, is, I'm all for sniping back and forth at each other with rivalries and good-natured fun and all those things. But sometimes what you have to do at the end of a loss, Joe, is just tip your cap to your opponent and say, hey, good game, good job. Doesn't necessarily mean, Joe, that Vanderbilt is a better basketball team than Tennessee. They were on that day. It doesn't mean moving forward that they're going to be. But sometimes a little humility in the light of defeat goes a long way. And I thought there was a lot of whining from Tennessee fans over the weekend for the way that these games transpired. And I thought the pot shots that they took about Vanderbilt, it being their Super Bowl, was a little too far, Joe. I think there were some sore losers going on Saturday from Tennessee fans. And those are my people. These are my brethren, and I have to call them out.
I mean, I want them to keep doing it, man. Come on. I more and more of this, more ridiculous arguments back and forth. Rivalries bring out some of the dumbest arguments of people, and you're not gonna gracefully lose, right? Like you have to be able to have some kind of a rip back. I will say, Robby, I saw, the game is past Rick Barnes by.
Yeah.
Get out of here, man. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Oh my God. I think that like a football fan base that isn't used to having good basketball, in some cases still struggles with, like, you're going to lose some road games in conference play. And Vanderbilt, very good story this year with Mark Byington. I mean, I definitely did not think that they would win that game. But there's a really loud phone ringing here. It's one freaking game, man. And right now Tennessee, they always have this dip too, don't they? They have this dip around this time of year,
Yes.
like offensively and things like that. And so it's overreaction in general. But I want to see that stuff. I want message board geniuses to be able to get some, like Tennessee fans saying this proves that like Vanderbilt fans were, have hired Connor Stallions or whatever it might be. I'm here for not taking a loss graceful in a rivalry, because the Vanderbilt Tennessee thing is really interesting to me. It's like. I think they do a pretty good job of getting under each other's skins. It's not, Auburn, Alabama, where, it's like they've had this great history of all these great games. There's a huge disparity, of course, in football, and now there has been in basketball. But with Vanderbilt getting good again in men's and women's basketball, and now obviously those have kind of been Tennessee's domains, I think we got a lot of potential here.
I think we got a lot of potential too. I don't know, if we cared half as much as you guys did stuff always kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's like,
yeah,
well, you don't play that much throughout a year, and you don't play this in-state rivalry at like hardly at all. You play them twice a year. Like, you should probably care. You should probably care about those games. So, like, to me, when you say stuff like that, you're basically indicting yourself and your team when you say that.
Yeah, the we didn't really care, this is your Super Bowl thing. I mean, that's one of the that it happens. It happens all the time, but that is one of the lamer responses, I would say, in the rivalry back and forth for sure. I mean, look, Tennessee's trying to win the SEC. Tennessee's trying to get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament.
You should care.
They may not have celebrated that they beat Vanderbilt, but it's a huge game. And so, and look, I thought that floor rushing, by the way, was, because I don't think it has to be like the number 1 team, which Tennessee recently was, by the way. But that floor rushing to me was like, that was a awesome floor rushing, and it was also okay. You should go get that $250,000 fine for that game, to beat Tennessee, because obviously it just hasn't happened much recently. Jerry Stackhouse did get him one time though.
Yeah,
well, that 2 years ago.
I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was an incredible finish. But I love it, man. I mean, if we can actually I think that we absolutely have it coming with. I love both of these programs in the women's game. Incredible comeback from Vanderbilt yesterday after Tennessee totally flipped the game around. I think those programs are set up for long-term success and some really good rivalry stuff. And then, it's early for Byington, great early returns. And there's always the Rick Barnes, how much longer and things like that. But if you're a Tennessee fan at this point who doesn't want Rick Barnes to continue being your coach, I don't know what I can do for you, man.
I'm with you. Like, they're going to be fine as they move forward here. Then once we get to tournament time, the same questions are going to come up of, all right, can this team push through and get to a Final Four? As you brought up, and I would agree, like, they had a Final Four team last year and they ran into Purdue, right? So it's going to be the same stuff as they move forward here. But again, sometimes just tip your cap in defeat and say, hey, you know what? Good game, Vanderbilt. Is that too much to ask, Joe? Am I being unrealistic?
Yes, absolutely it is. But I mean, it's worth a shot. William from Madison says Tennessee fans are mad at Jelly Roll for rooting for Vanderbilt.
I did see that.
I saw Jelly Roll and Candace Lee sitting there.
I will
in
the
the stands. He's an Nashville guy,
I believe, though, I have seen a clip of him before talking about, being a Tennessee fan.
Yeah.
So now he was sitting there with Vanderbilt.
I mean, if you get invited to the Tennessee Vanderbilt game by the Vanderbilt AD, like, you got to root for Vanderbilt, right?
I would assume so. Busy day for Jelly Roll on Saturday. He was at the Preds game too. He was in the locker room after the Preds game.
Really?
A lot of Jelly Roll on Saturday around
here. That guy is freaking everywhere.
Yeah,
and he's getting dubs everywhere too. Well, if he did actually want Vanderbilt to win,
I mean, he was cheering.
Yeah.
That did make a lot of Tennessee fans mad. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll get back into the Titans coming up next. Cory Curtis will be with us at 8:30, and we'll get into all things Titans with him as well. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Robby and Rexrode sponsored by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/getitall. We'll have Cory Curtis from News 2 with us at 8:30 today on the program. We'll get into all things Tennessee Titans with him. Right now, discussing the hiring of Mike Borgonzi as the next Titans general manager. Borgonzi, the assistant GM in Kansas City, and he is now the newest member of the Tennessee Titans. Expecting a press conference later this week at some point on the Borgonzi front. So we'll see what that looks like and how that goes. That will be a very fascinating press conference when that happens. Joe, I do want to get to on the Borgonzi front something from Albert Breer from SI.com at Monday Morning Quarterback. He put this out there in his piece today. I'll just read a brief part of it. It says, initially, I was like a lot of people looking at the Tennessee opening with President of Football Operations Chad Brinker in charge and Coach Brian Callahan in place. It was natural to ask whether the position was a real general manager position. The Titans insisted that it was. Landing Borgonzi, one of the top GM candidates in the league, seems to prove it. That said, the structure intentionally is a little different than what most NFL teams employ, or a lot different. Callahan will report to Borgonzi, and Borgonzi will report to Brinker in a setup that mirrors what you'd see in other sports. This is where Breer's comments get interesting, Joe. It says, Borgonzi will oversee coaching, scouting, sports medicine, sports performance, and player development, and have final say on the roster. The idea generally is to allow Borgonzi to focus on building the team and football operation and take some of the newer age elements of the job off his plate. What do you make of that from Albert Breer?
I don't really know what to make of any of this anymore. I'm basically to the point where it's like, show me the freaking football team. You know, like the Titans have made it so we talk so much about people wearing suits, and they're extremely boring. You know,
It really is.
I mean, that's what happens when you're constantly changing things and you're bad. If you have bad football teams, then obviously that stuff changes every year, and it's man, I don't know. I mean, obviously the Titans they're in severe damage control mode right now, just with the overall performance and all the just wacky, bizarre moves that their owner has made. And so, look, I will say that amid all this stuff, Borgonzi he was definitely someone who was one of those obvious people out there who could get a GM job. So, you know, I mean, if nothing else, I would say this speaks to like Brinker's ability probably to be convincing, you know. I don't know, does that help get like a good free agent too? Is that, I mean, you want to take it to that? Maybe he's very persuasive. I mean, we had Rand, it was like, oh, he's great relationships with people, and you know, it's going to be so huge, and he really like gets to know the players. I'm like, okay, great. I mean, you know, does he sign good players and make good choices or not? But it's just like, it really is. Maybe I'm on an island here, but like, I'm so sick of all of like the who's doing what and doing this and this title and that title. And
you're not on an island.
Duty. And it's just, man, pick some people in suits, hand them their neckties, and see if you can get some good football players for once.
I got one text that says, will the new GM be bringing the refs with him? Asking for a friend. That's good. A lot of conversation about the officiating with Kansas City, Joe.
Yeah. Well, and to their credit, they didn't call that one where Mahomes is like, okay, I'm just going to stand here and let you hit me. Here, let me come here, right here. Go ahead. Hit me right there. Come on, hit me.
Perform a somersault after that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a little overblown personally. I mean, but it's like,
well,
it's
forever
like
they were helping the Patriots, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like Duke basketball. You know, let's ask Vingan. But if you're not a Duke fan for all those years, it would always be like, oh, Duke gets all the calls. Like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe sometimes. I mean, you know, Mahomes certainly had a lot of calls that have gone his way in terms of like roughing and things like that. But other QBs get those too, right? I mean, it's just how they call roughing, right?
Yes, which is a different conversation for another day. But yeah,
yeah.
I don't know that there's some grand conspiracy on the Kansas City Chiefs part of it. But look, if Borgonzi has some insight to bring some of that here where the Titans benefit for some calls, hey, I'm all for it. Why not?
Sure.
That's worth the hire right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like Kansas City is like this, it's not Philly or New York, LA market, right?
No.
So you just have to get really great and have a generational QB. And
They
then
do have
maybe
the Swifties now.
Yeah, Swifties and Caitlin Clark. I mean, how much did the internet break on that one?
A lot of stuff going on up there in that box. A lot of time spent showing what's going up there on that box as well. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a Mike Borgonzi expert. From what I read, from what I hear, a lot of people really like him. He had a good reputation around the league. I think he clearly, Joe, has been on a path that it eventually was going to lead to him being a general manager one day. My biggest takeaway from this is what I said a little bit earlier in the show. Look, he was hired. He came from a great organization who's done a lot of winning. The Titans just did that with Rand Carthon, and it didn't translate. So we'll see if this one does or if it doesn't. What it does tell me is the Titans, I think, have done a good job of selling what this job is, right? First with the league. Like the league obviously was concerned about the structure of this, so they looked into it, and the Titans did a good job of explaining or selling what the job is going to be. Borgonzi clearly felt satisfied enough with whatever the Titans told him to take the job. Now, obviously, there's an elevation in title. There's an elevation in money that comes along with it that you obviously have to factor into this discussion. But I still don't know, even with that in mind, for a guy that most people believe was on a fast track to being a general manager anyway, like if he didn't feel like he had pretty good structure in place and a pretty good role with this team, would he have really taken the job at this point? It's a fair question to wonder. So my takeaway is the Titans have done a pretty good job of selling to Borgonzi what their plan is moving forward here.
I agree. I hesitate to, for any any Titans fan who wants to be optimistic, I want to pump the brakes, calm down, don't get too excited. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to get there, but you're into the offseason now. This guy was a coveted candidate. So what does that mean? I think you're probably right that they sold it well to him, and it also may speak to his belief that Brinker's good, right? Yeah. Because certainly it's at least a partnership when it comes to selecting players. I mean, also you wonder about, like, does this speak well to his thoughts on Brian Callahan?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to look at the whole situation. Like owners, there's just in this league, owners, there are plenty of owners who, I guess are questionable in certain ways. The money, obviously, huge jump from what he was doing to a GM title job. But again, he could get other GM title jobs. So why this one? Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks, like you said, to them selling him, but also it must speak somewhat to his opinion on the people he's going to be working with here.
I would assume so. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Your thoughts on the hiring of Mike Borgonzi as general manager by the Tennessee Titans. We'll get into some of those coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We'll have Cory Curtis from News 2 with us on the program here in about 15 minutes. Right now, taking your thoughts on the Titans, 615-737-1025. Trevor says, let Borgonzi bake, LOL. Now we're back at it. For Brinker, I think let Brinker tinker was pretty good. Let Borgonzi bake coming off of let Rand cook. I really like.
I like let Borgonzi bake. Let Borgonzi be cool like Fonzie.
Now we're trying a little hard, I think.
Here we go. Let's go. Okay, we can go with Borgonzi bake. That's fine. Alliteration's always. I mean, I like rhyming too. Yeah. Ideally, if you can have rhyming and alliteration at the same time, that's elite. But in this case, the alliteration is probably better than the rhyming. Let Borgonzi not let the Titans jump the shark like Fonzie.
I like that a little better.
Way too hard.
Now we're trying really hard, but maybe you can make a T-shirt out of that. That'll be good.
Yeah.
Wes says, as long as they don't use the word collaborate, I'm like Joe. Just show me the players and let's go.
Yeah.
We have spent an inordinate amount of time talking about like GM sayings and phrases and all this other crap. Good Lord, they need a good football team badly.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Amy. Really appreciate it. Robert on the text line said, with the Borgonzi conversation, says, oh, Lord, we heard the same thing about Rand, rinse and repeat. Yes, you did hear, Now, again, with Rand, he was number 3 with the Niners, right? So there was, realistically, I guess the way things would normally go, you would think that Peters would be next. Then, so Borgonzi has been, he has definitely been more of like an obvious short list who's next to get a GM job guy than I think Rand was 2 years ago.
Yes.
But you're right, Robert. Of course, like a lot of this stuff is exactly as it's like this organization. He came from this place. They did this and that. And of course, we're going to hear that at the press conference about, his role and whatever decisions maybe he had a significant hand in and things like that. And it just doesn't, the reality is like some people have an obvious, incredible knack for consistently picking players or a process with their scouts and everything that consistently yields that success. But just because you came from a place like that, obviously, in terms of GMing and coaching, does not guarantee, nor does it even necessarily make it likely that you're going to do the same thing at your new spot.
Look, I'm just glad they got him in here now, Joe, and he can, even before the press conference begins, he can go through copious amounts of film study on Colt Anderson and Nick Holtz, and we can figure out who's going to be here on the coaching staff, who's not going to be as they move into next year. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, or they'll just come in and say, hey, I know we went 3-14, but what do you think? Keep everybody, go run it back? Sure, sounds good. Let me check that box and move on. Yeah. Seriously, like, I don't know, man. I guess Charles told me it's not weird, so I guess if Charles says it's not weird, then it's not weird. I am looking forward to Charles and his thoughts on this whole thing.
I am. I got one texter that says, everyone said, quote, no quarterback in this class is worth the number 1 pick in 2017. The best quarterback we've seen in decades, maybe ever, was taken at number 10 overall. This from an unnamed texter.
You got to show me that where everybody said no quarterback. The big thing with that class is a lot of people saying like Deshaun Watson should be the top pick, not, some Trubisky kind of came out of nowhere, and the Bears organization in its Great wisdom, pick. Went there. But I don't remember. You tell me, Robbie. You remember hearing people saying there's no first rounders in the 17 draft?
No, I did not hear that. Now, look,
someone might have said it, but it wasn't a popular thought.
I don't think anybody expected Patrick Mahomes to turn into this. So that I will grant you. But Mitch Trubisky went number 2 overall. The reason he didn't go 1 overall was Cleveland had the first pick and they had just taken Baker Mayfield and they took Myles Garrett. So there's that.
Yeah, no doubt. Ron says Calaganzi. What do you think, Calaganzi? No, listen. Actually, it's beautiful. Borgonzi, that gives you the Z. So we're still, the power structure continues to be Burt Nihil, Chad Brinker, Berserker. The Borgonzi part that puts in the Z in Berserker. So Berserker is absolutely locked in, man.
Yeah, I mean,
It's going to be the Berserker era has begun.
I mean, speaking of T-shirts, I feel like that's got to be right up your alley as this next season begins here.
I need a good shot of that Russian metal singer's face, and we will we will sell these like hotcakes.
DJ Burnside, get on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of quarterbacks,
Jay and Silent Bob, maybe coaching special teams. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. It is going to be interesting to see. What does Borgonzi think about these two quarterbacks? Like, regardless of who like the final say decision maker is at the end of this, Joe, I would assume Borgonzi's opinion going to mean a lot on the evaluation of these quarterbacks. Chad Brinkers, I'm sure, will mean a lot. Brian Callahan should mean a lot in this discussion as well. So, how does Borgonzi view the Sanders-Ward part of this? And also, like, was that a part of the reason why he took the job? Like, has he already started to look at Shedeur Sanders and Ward and says, you know what? I feel like one of those guys could be great, and this is an opportunity for me to take that guy.
No, that is a good point. That's a good point to throw into this. Is like maybe he's already completely locked in on one of those guys. Said, "Oh, I have a chance to have that guy be my quarterback. Well, I guess I'll go to this ragtag operation and hope that's enough." I mean, who knows? That's possible. As Joel brings up, Mike Borgonzi and Nate Bargatze opening Italian joint. Is Nate Bargatze excited about the Mike Borgonzi era?
I mean, he should be. I think so. Like, we'll have to get Mike Organ, who's apparently best friends with Nate Bargatze, on the scene to see if he can figure this thing out. But I did, as soon as they hired him, I thought of Nate Bargatze immediately, which is probably a sign of my TikTok feed, which RIP TikTok, that's now back. It lasted 12 hours. So way to go.
You've been on TikTok?
Yeah.
God, you're such a Gen Zer. Incredible. My kids are all like, I don't know. They're like, oh, they actually took like 10 minutes off their phone and they're like, oh, no, we're back. Oh, good. Thank goodness.
Yeah. I mean, look, Nate Bargatze wants to open up a theme park here too.
Oh, I'm here for it.
According to Mike Organ. Mike Organ is the source for all things Nate Bargatze. So
I'm here for whatever that guy wants to do, man. That guy should be like the mayor, governor,
I'm with you.
That dude's awesome. I mean, the fact that he can make me laugh for more than an hour and never say the F word is actually unprecedented.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Like, again, I'm my biggest reaction to this, Joe, is I'm just glad it's over. I'm glad that they've picked their general manager, and now we can move ahead here and start to get into how are you reshaping this team? How are you going to rebuild this team? What are you doing this offseason to get this team closer to being competitive? Are you able to make the right decisions? Do you handle the number one overall pick, whether it's sticking and picking or making the trade down? Like, do you handle that the right way? Now that the power structure is in place, I mean, all of us are now along for the ride. So how do they handle it? That starts now that this thing is done.
Yeah, I mean, look, we obviously try to put off draft talk as long as we can, understandably, because we have a long way to go. But I'm actually like eagerly looking forward to starting to break down the edges in this draft. And, how do some of the interior linemen in the 5th round look as opposed to this constant, Game of Thrones / Succession thing we've got going on with Amy's team here?
Sounds to me like you would be really excited about the NFL Combine.
I am excited to watch the videos of people who talk to these guys there. It's going to be awesome. I'll be sitting right next to you.
Andrew from Dover says, I think a lot of us Titans fans will be happy if he comes in. We hear from him in the press conference and don't hear from or talk about Brinker anymore. We'll be happy myself if Borgonzi has final say on the roster and the coaching staff. I would assume you're going to hear from Chad Brinker this week.
Yeah, you're not going to get that. I mean, think about, remember when we were all trying to figure out what was going on, they were bringing Brinker to those pressers before,
Yeah.
So like
the annual press conference, yes.
And like last year they did like kind of like a meet and greet with some writers and stuff, and it was ran Callahan and Brinker. So, I mean, he's sort of been, lurking,
Yes.
right? Looming the whole time. But, yeah, I don't think you're going to, it's not going to be like Steve Underwood where you just every once in a while see him with that glorious mustache walking through the hallway. I mean, I think Brinker's going to be front and center, like it or not.
Joseph, have a safe trip back to Nashville. We will speak with you tomorrow, and we look forward to your return tonight in cold weather with no jacket.
Thank you very much. It should be fun, and should be a good one tonight.
Looking forward to it.
Go Irish or Buckeyes, or none of the above if you prefer. Hey guys.
We'll have Cory Curtis from News 2 with us coming up next. We'll get into the Mike Borgonzi hiring and all things Tennessee Titans with him. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. And we head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcoming our friend Cory Curtis from News 2, brought to you by Tennessee Men's Clinic. Cory, good morning. How are you?
You know, I just thought the three of us would get together as NFC North residents and just do like shots and misery together. As you know, the division has the greatest year ever, and none of them are capable of making it to the conference final.
Could have a really good time in Cancun together, though. I mean, I'm sure, you know, when Dan Campbell told Kevin O'Connell a couple weeks ago that he'd see him in a couple weeks, I don't know if this is quite what he had in mind, Cory.
No, I don't think so. But, man, that's the playoffs. And, you know, how many times do we say it's about getting in the tournament and getting hot at the right time? And what do you
No
see?
doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just start there. So, you know, divisional weekend comes and goes. Washington takes down Detroit. Great game between Buffalo and Baltimore, like we knew it would be. The Bills come out on top there. Eagles win as well. And then, of course, Kansas City does what Kansas City does, and that is just continue to win. And their seventh consecutive trip to the AFC title game. Yeah, overall, what did you make of the weekend, and what stands out to you the most?
Well, I think the Commanders stand out the most because Jaden Daniels, you know, look, regardless of what you thought of him coming into the draft, good or bad, no one could have thought he was going to be this good this quickly. His cool under pressure is absolutely staggeringly amazing. And, you know, he has elevated that team. You know, Dan Quinn certainly deserves a lot of credit. He's the head coach, but that team knows they have a guy that will win them games, and they play like it. And he is unbelievable. I see they're a 5.5-point dog. I like them to win over the Eagles next week because they are on fire, and he is playing better than Jalen Hurts right now, and I don't think it's close. And so I'm anxious to see that football game because I think they could pull the upset and be that wild card in the Super Bowl. So that was something. And as for the Lions, did you not feel like we watched that game like 17 times this year?
I sure did.
I'm like, this looks like, you know, the way the Titans found ways to lose game this year. And so it's just a valuable lesson that no matter how bad you think the Titans are, and look, they lost a lot of games this year. When you turn the ball over, you lose. So if they can manage to correct that part of their game this offseason, you can see it can put them in position to win a lot more games. I'm not saying it makes them the 15-2 Lions or whatever, but I am saying it puts them in a position to win a lot more games. You can't turn the ball over that much and win, even when you're as good as the Lions. Shoot, we saw it here with the Titans against the Bengals, and we saw it here with the Titans against the Ravens in the playoffs. You can be great. If you turn the ball over in the postseason, you will lose. That's just what happens. You know, I think I don't know what was the turnover number in the Texans game. I don't think they turned it over, right?
They got allowed 1,000 sacks, though. I mean, they give up 8
sacks.
Yeah,
they give up 8 sacks.
It's just big plays at big times, right? Like you got to protect your quarterback, and you can't turn the ball over.
Yeah, and they're livid with their offensive line, and their offensive line hasn't been great all year. I know everybody feels like Stroud took a little bit of a step back this year, and he did because he got pummeled. You know, their offensive line wasn't good enough, and so he also lost some pretty good receivers, along the way. But that was certainly an issue, and I know everybody's complaining about the officiating in Kansas City, and I get it. But I think most of that stems from when you want a team to lose so badly that any call that doesn't go against them, you're just like, oh, not another one. That's just, when teams lose, they look for excuses, and officiating is quite often the easiest scapegoat.
Cory, when you look at the hiring of Mike Borgonzi as the next general manager for the Titans, obviously he comes from a winning organization. I know that none of us are like Mike Borgonzi experts as we sit here today, but what do you make of the hire, and what do you make of the structure that is now in place with the Titans?
Well, it seems to be a more, clear-cut structure, more of a straight line instead of a tree. And I think, I would think that's more effective in the way you run things, I would think, but they thought the other way was going to be more effective, but they were 3-14. So you change. I think number one, I think most of us are pretty stunned they got him, because tell me if I'm wrong. Didn't everyone consider him the best GM candidate out there for all the teams that needed a GM?
A lot of people did. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so he's top of the list. We all expected them just to tab John Eric Sullivan because, the Green Bay buddy, that's the way it was going to be. So they got the best guy. And I said this to Jared Friday, regardless of how you get there. If you asked everybody, you could have Rand Carthon or Mike Borgonzi, who would they say? They'd probably say Borgonzi. Yeah. So you would have to say, regardless of how they got there, they upgraded. I think Albert Breer reported he does have final say on the roster.
He did say that, yes.
And I have gone to the mat on this. There's no way he takes that job without having final say on the roster. And look, Amy Adams-Strunk has final say on the roster. Right. First and foremost, she has final say on the roster, but he gets to make the picks. He gets to make the trades. There's nobody who wants to be a GM who takes that job because you only get it once. Nobody gets hired again to be a GM. Are you going to risk your career on a job where you don't actually get to make the picks? No, you're not. And, he clearly has a plan with the first pick and with the $55 million in cap space. And they clearly liked his plan. It was probably the most symmetrical with what Chad Brinker has to say. Did you hear what Andy Reid was saying after the game?
I did.
This weekend? Yeah. I mean, when Andy Reid gives somebody a stamp like that, I think it means something to me. Now, look, we all thought the same thing about Chris Ballard when he came out of Kansas City. Yep. And that hasn't worked so well. So there's no guarantee here that Mike Borgonzi is the magic elixir. But on paper, it's a strong move. And, we'll see what the plan is and see if it works. I can tell you this, if they get a quarterback, it's going to work. If they don't, it's probably not.
So, Cory, on that front, I mean, obviously, from now until the time the draft comes around, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward and all that. And we'll have plenty of time to get to that. I want to ask you about the veteran market real quickly, just because that could also be an option for the Titans. You can make an argument that that's the better option for the Titans. Yep. So with that in mind, how appealing would an Aaron Rodgers to the Titans scenario be for you if you're evaluating this, if you're Brian Callahan, if you're Mike Borgonzi, when you look at the options that are available or could be available in free agency on the veteran front, where does Rodgers kind of line up to you?
On a scale of, 1 being, my least favorite decision and 100 being like, oh my gosh, that's the best decision I've ever heard in my life, it would probably be like a -50.
Oh, wow. That's very
he's
bad.
A poison pill. He's a poison pill, right?
He is.
Did he elevate the New York Jets?
He did not. Now, having said that,
okay,
it's the New York Jets.
Having said that, he's Aaron Rodgers. He's the quarterback. The Cincinnati Bengals were horrible, and Joe Burrow went in there and has made them into a good team. I mean, Joe Burrow is the number one reason. And
I hear that.
I don't know if you noticed.
Cincinnati Bengals ownership was not making decisions based on Madden ratings either. So there's
no,
that.
But the reason the owner is making decision based on Madden ratings because this team that they put together that some people, had projected as a Super Bowl contender because there are players on that roster.
Yeah.
Was an absolute disaster. And that's why, that leads to owners making crazy decisions when the team that's supposed to be good isn't. Okay. And when the team that's supposed to, when you get Aaron Rodgers and you trade for Devontae Adams and you still can't score 30 points, it's an issue. When, the quarterback who's supposed to turn your franchise around goes to Egypt instead of going to mandatory minicamp to work with his team, that's the problem. And does Aaron Rodgers need the practice? Probably not. But it sends a message. It sends a message about leadership. It sends a message about his commitment to the team. It sends a message to the rest of the team about how important they are to him. And I mean, when you see these teams with quarterbacks that players will just die for, I mean, it's different. It's different. I mean, Steve McNair stood on a podium with this team and with that locker room. You know, you see that with, you know, Jaden Daniels, even this early in Washington. I mean, there is a ton of reverence for that dude right now. You know, when we talk about the Eagles and they're, you know, obviously where they are, when they have their struggles, because they have moments where you're like, oh boy, but what are those struggles always about? It's always about the quarterback and his relationship with some of the guys, you know, and I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is a bad dude, but that's where people go when it doesn't look right. And so you've got to, that position has to be the most selfless position on the team. I always remember Steve McNair as one of the most selfless people ever that I've covered in a locker room, because if the Titans lost 44-43, he'd say, I didn't do enough today. Yeah. He wouldn't pin it on anybody else. He'd be like, I didn't do enough today. I got to find a way to put 2 more points on the board. And Aaron Rodgers goes to Egypt. And so, you know, that's for a team that's trying to reestablish itself, and a coaching staff that's trying to establish its culture. I mean, can you imagine Brian Callahan? Is he even older than Aaron Rodgers?
He may not be. Now that I think about it.
So he's trying to be the boss of this team, and he's got Aaron Rodgers basically telling him he doesn't matter. I mean, you saw him go to Matthew Saleh to Saleh on the sideline, and you know, Saleh tries to give him a hug, and he's like, nope. I mean, everybody saw that. It was brutal.
Oh yeah,
it was brutal. And can you imagine that with Brian Callahan? He's like, nope, I'm bigger than you, and you can't have people on the team, especially that position, who think they're bigger and more important than everybody else. They have to be selfless. They have to be selfless. They have to be willing to give themselves to their teammates and the team. And I'm probably going a little too far on this, but yeah, that's where I'm at on Aaron Rodgers. All right.
-50.
I think it would be a massive mistake. It would set this team back in the long run. It might just be like Zava with Ted Lasso. He could come in and make a splash early, but then the team would crater and he would be gone.
Cory Curtis joins us every Monday morning here on the program. Cory, I figured you might have a strong opinion on the Aaron Rodgers front.
Look, it's not me about hating Aaron Rodgers. It's about me looking at who he is at this point in his life and his career,
it's fair.
And where the Titans are. If you were a team that you thought you were a quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl and there were no good choices out there, it might be worth the gamble. But you're building, all right? And he is not a building block. He's a stick of dynamite.
Cory Curtis from News 2. Cory, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, let's go farm avocados with Zaba.
Cory Curtis, brought to you by Tennessee Men's Clinic, joins us every Monday here on the show. We'll react to what Cory had to say coming up next. Final thoughts on divisional weekend from the NFL playoffs as well, and looking ahead to the national title game tonight between Notre Dame and Ohio State. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final segment of the day, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, sponsored by First Horizon Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley alongside Nick Keyser here with you on this Monday morning. Appreciate Cory Curtis from News 2 for being with us in the last segment. Divisional weekend has come and gone in the National Football League. Washington taking down Detroit 45-31. Kansas City, a 23-14 winner against Houston. Kansas City advances to their 7th consecutive AFC title game, and they'll take on the Buffalo Bills, who were 27-25 winners last night against Baltimore. Philadelphia, a 28-22 winner against the Rams. So the Bills, the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Commanders, the final 4 in the National Football League. You know, the Detroit game, and we heard from Rexrode earlier in the show, just a devastating game for the family. It reminded me a lot of the Titans-Bengals game 3 years ago in terms of you're the number 1 seed. You had 3 turnovers from the quarterback in the game, and it was more high scoring. It wasn't like, the Titans defense got shelled like Detroit's did in that game. But as Cory pointed out in the last segment, when you turn the football over, it's hard to win in the playoffs. Ask Baltimore last night. Just a brutal night from Mark Andrews. So Mark Andrews has a crucial drop in the first half, and then just an abysmal drop on the 2-point conversion that would have tied the game at 27-all. Fumbled the ball on the drive before that. It's just a brutal way for the season to end for the Ravens. 3 turnovers. So Lamar had the interception in the first half, also had the fumble, and then the turnover from Mark Andrews. You turn the ball over 3 times against a team like Buffalo, and you're just not going to win. And we've heard from a lot of people on the show today talking about how they feel for Derrick Henry. He ends up with 84 yards and a touchdown in the game last night. All in all, like that partnership between Lamar and Derrick Henry was really good this year, and I'm interested to see if they can do it again next year together. But just a situation where Buffalo took care of the football and the Ravens didn't, and now we get a Buffalo-Kansas City matchup in Arrowhead for the right to go to the Super Bowl. And look, I think Chiefs fatigue certainly starting to set in around the country. A lot of discussion about the officiating in the Houston and Kansas City game. I think going to be a lot of Buffalo Bill fans nationwide next Sunday when they take on the Chiefs. I think we just assume that Kansas City is going to get to this point every year. And it's something that I think is pretty easy to take for granted what they're doing. 7 trips in a row to the AFC title game is unbelievable. And yeah, Chiefs fatigue is setting in with me too. And I'll be rooting for Buffalo coming up on Sunday. But it is pretty unbelievable that Kansas City just continues to put themselves in this spot. Travis Kelce, again, doing what he does in the playoffs. 7 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown on Saturday in that game. So, look, Buffalo, I think, has a good shot to go in there and win. I think Buffalo at different times this year has been as dangerous as anybody in the NFL. But it's Kansas City, and it's Kansas City at home. And at this point, with the amount of winning that they've done, I think it would be crazy for me or anybody else to pick against them until we see it at this point. National title game tonight between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Ohio State, an 8.5-point favorite in this matchup. A lot of conversation around the sport right now about how late into this we are. It's January the 20th. It's the first edition of the college football playoff, of the 12-team college football playoff. Would it make sense to move the season up, the calendar up in college football as we move forward here? I don't expect that to change next year, but I do think that'll probably become a conversation point at some point. Would you be better served if you're college football moving your season up and maybe starting a week earlier? Maybe where week 0 is right now becomes week 1. There's a lot of conversation, too, about the Army-Navy game. Would they be better off moving the Army-Navy game and potentially starting the season with that? I think that's an intriguing idea. The 12-team playoff, when your team's not in it, it's a long process. Now, look, it's Notre Dame and Ohio State. I'm sure the ratings tonight will be really good, right? That's 2 iconic brands, 2 teams that have been around for a long time, that have a rich history. So I would imagine the ratings, provided that there's a semi-decent game tonight, are going to be pretty good. But just something to keep an eye on the college football front as you move forward here. Would it make more sense to move up the calendar and to start things off a little sooner so you can get the playoff done earlier in the calendar. Now, a lot of people have thrown out like the national championship should be on January 1st every year, and you should play it in the Rose Bowl. I don't know that I love the idea of having the national championship game in the same spot every year, but I do understand the thought process behind moving that part of it up. But we'll see what happens tonight. Hopefully a good game between Notre Dame and Ohio State. That's going to do it for us today here on the program. We'll be back 6 a.m. tomorrow. Chasing Big Joe is coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.